In the human experience, there are two very different ways in which people interact with one another through love or through use. On the surface, they may sometimes look similar, but the foundation is entirely different. To love is to recognize the intrinsic value of another being, to see them not as a tool for one's own gain, but as a reflection of life itself. To use, however, is to reduce a person to an object, a function, a temporary role that serves a need. The distinction may appear subtle, but it is the very difference between connection and exploitation, between nourishment and depletion, between harmony and destruction. Love is expansive. It does not diminish when given, instead it grows. When love is extended, both the giver and the receiver are strengthened. It is rooted in respect, in patience, and in the willingness to accept the other as they are. Love is not rushed, nor is it demanding. It does not keep a scorecard. It sees beyond mistakes, beyond flaws, and beyond temporary circumstances. Love understands that to truly honor another is to allow them to be free to grow in their own way and to walk their own path without being held hostage to expectations. Use, on the other hand, contracts. It reduces the relationship to transaction. To use another person is to view them as a means to an end, as a provider of comfort, of status, of wealth, or of pleasure. Use never looks beyond what can be extracted in the moment. It has no patience for growth, no tolerance for imperfection, and no room for freedom. Once the usefulness has expired, the connection is discarded like a worn-out tool. There is no genuine nourishment in use. There is only consumption until depletion. When we examine the motives behind our interactions, it becomes clear whether we are living in the field of love or the field of use. A heart moved by love will ask, how can I contribute? How can I support? How can I help elevate this life in front of me? A mind moved by use will ask, what can I get? How does this serve me? What can I take and at what cost? The difference in these questions reveals the inner state of the one who asks them. Love reflects abundance, use reflects scarcity. Love flows outward because it is overflowing, use grasps outward because it is empty. In many relationships, the confusion arises because use often wears the mask of love. A person may speak the words of love, but their actions are rooted in need and extraction. Promises are made, but conditions are attached. Care is shown, but only when it guarantees a return. What is mistaken for love is often dependency, attachment, or the fear of being alone. To discern between love and use requires clarity, for the ego has a strong ability to disguise self-interest as affection. Love is freedom, use is control. When one truly loves, they do not bind or manipulate. They do not pressure or demand. They allow the other to exist as they are, without trying to reshape them into a personal ideal. Love allows space for individuality, for growth, for mistakes, for becoming. To use someone is to control them, to confine them to the role of servant to one's desires. Control is never an expression of love. It is only fear disguised as care. The human heart longs for love because love is the natural state of being. It resonates with our essence. To give love is to align with our true self. To use, however, creates inner conflict. Even if temporarily satisfying, the act of using corrodes the inner world because deep down the soul knows it has not honored the sacredness of another. Use leaves behind emptiness, while love leaves behind growth. Love requires strength, patience, and openness. It is not passive but deeply active, requiring the discipline to resist selfish impulses and the courage to give without the certainty of return. Love is not naive. It sees clearly. But even when it sees imperfection, it chooses to respond with compassion rather than exploitation. Use requires no strength, no patience, and no openness. It is the path of least resistance, the instinctive grasping for comfort without considering its cost to another. When love flows, relationships become a space of healing and empowerment. Both individuals expand in the presence of one another. There is no fear of loss because love is not about possession. When use dominates, relationships become battlegrounds of extraction, a constant weighing of who owes what, of who benefits more, of who is at risk of being left behind once their usefulness ends. Love sustains life because it is aligned with the nature of existence itself, which is growth, expansion, and interconnection. Use drains life because it is misaligned, operating on the false assumption that others exist only for the self. Love is eternal in essence, while use is temporary, lasting only as long as the utility remains. To choose love over use is not simply a moral decision but a way of aligning with truth. It is the recognition that every being holds inherent value, that no person is reducible to a function, and that the essence of connection lies in giving, not grasping. Love elevates the giver as much as the receiver, while use diminishes both. Love and use are not just ways of relating to others, they are reflections of how one relates to oneself. To love oneself is to respect one's own value, to nurture, to care, and to give space for growth. To use oneself is to exploit, to push beyond limits without care, to sacrifice well-being for temporary gain. The inner relationship mirrors the outer. One who uses the self will inevitably use others. One who loves the self will inevitably love others. The choice, then, is present in every moment of interaction. Whether with friends, partners, family, or strangers, the path diverges. To see the other as life deserving of honor or as an object to be consumed in exploitation is rarely loud. It does not always come with a declaration, nor does it always reveal itself in the obvious. More often than not, it hides in the subtle gestures, in the quiet manipulations, and in the patterns that slowly drain a person's strength. To understand exploitation, one must first learn to observe the signs that unfold not only in relationships with others, but also within the systems we engage in and the dynamics we accept as normal. The signs are both external and internal, manifesting through emotions, behaviors, and environments that reveal a power imbalance. One of the first signs of exploitation is the imbalance of giving and taking. Every healthy relationship or system carries a rhythm of reciprocity, a natural flow of exchange where both sides are nourished. When exploitation takes root, this rhythm is disrupted. One side continues to give, often beyond their capacity, while the other takes without concern for balance. It can be seen in work when someone contributes far more effort than they are acknowledged or compensated for. It can be observed in personal connections where one person consistently invests their energy, time, and care, while the other becomes a silent consumer of those offerings. Over time, this imbalance creates exhaustion, leaving the giver drained and the taker increasingly dependent on the unbalanced exchange. Another sign is the presence of guilt as a controlling force. Exploitation thrives when a person begins to feel guilty for saying no, for setting boundaries, or even for desiring rest. The manipulative hand of exploitation often presses guilt into the mind of the one being used, convincing them that their worth is tied to their compliance. If the thought of resisting someone's request immediately brings up feelings of selfishness or fear of abandonment, it is often not love or duty at work, but manipulation disguised as loyalty. This erosion of the right to say no is one of the clearest signs that one's freedom has been compromised. Exploitation also reveals itself through the silencing of one's voice. In environments where individuals are discouraged from questioning, where their concerns are brushed aside, or where speaking up results in punishment or ridicule, exploitation is taking place. Silence is not always chosen, sometimes it is imposed. The one being exploited begins to shrink their voice, not because they have nothing to say, but because they learn that their words hold no value to those benefiting from their silence. Over time, the silence becomes internalized and the individual begins to doubt their own right to express themselves. A further sign is the normalization of discomfort. When exploitation has been present for long enough, it begins to disguise itself as routine. Long hours of unpaid work, endless emotional labor, or repeated sacrifices without recognition become part of the normal order. The exploited person may even convince themselves that this is how life is supposed to be. They rationalize the imbalances as a duty, as a responsibility, or as a sacrifice for a greater good. Yet deep inside, there is always a quiet awareness that something is wrong, though the mind has been conditioned to ignore it. Exploitation often carries with it the mark of fear as a binding chain. Fear of rejection, fear of losing status, fear of conflict, or fear of retaliation keeps people trapped in cycles of exploitation. The exploiter rarely needs to enforce this fear openly once it has been planted. It grows in the exploited mind, limiting choices and convincing the individual that submission is safer than resistance. Fear dulls the sense of possibility, creating an invisible prison where the walls are built from one's own doubts and insecurities. Another subtle yet powerful sign is the disappearance of joy. When someone is being used, their actions may continue, but the spirit with which they once gave begins to fade. What was once done with enthusiasm is now carried out with heaviness. The smile becomes a mask rather than an expression. Exploitation drains vitality, and though tasks may still be completed, the life force behind them becomes dim. The absence of joy is not always dramatic. It can be quiet, steady, and gradual, but its impact is profound. Exploitation also leaves a mark on the body. Stress, fatigue, and even illness can emerge as the physical consequences of being consistently overdrawn. The body begins to communicate what the mind has tried to suppress. Constant headaches, sleepless nights, and a lingering sense of heaviness are often physical signs that energy is being extracted beyond what is sustainable. The body becomes the final messenger, revealing through pain what words and thoughts have not yet been able to express. A critical sign is the lack of acknowledgement or recognition. When someone's contributions are consistently overlooked or taken for granted, it is not just forgetfulness, it is exploitation. Genuine appreciation nurtures growth, while exploitation ignores it, ensuring that the one who gives continues to do so without expectation of reward. The absence of recognition is a deliberate erasure, a way of reducing a person's value to the utility they provide. In many cases, the exploited individual will notice the subtle erosion of their self-worth. They begin to question whether their needs matter, whether their feelings are valid, whether their desires are too much to ask for. This internalized doubt is perhaps the most damaging sign, for once the exploited lose faith in their own worth, they become easier to control. The cycle continues not because the exploiter is powerful, but because the exploited has been conditioned to believe they are powerless. Exploitation does not need chains or visible force to exist. Its strength lies in its ability to disguise itself as duty, as love, as obligation, or as necessity. The signs are present for those who learn to observe imbalance, guilt, silence, fear, the loss of joy, the erosion of health, the absence of recognition, and the decline of self-worth. These are not small details, but profound signals that energy, freedom, and dignity are being consumed without respect for reciprocity. There is a profound difference between living a life guided by external validation and living a life rooted in the awareness of one's own self-worth. Self-worth is not an accessory that can be borrowed from others, nor is it a fleeting moment of confidence that arises only when circumstances are favorable. It is an inner knowing, a deep recognition of one's value, unshaken by praise or criticism, unaffected by gain or loss. Awareness of this self-worth is like discovering a hidden wellspring within, a source of strength that does not run dry regardless of the challenges life presents. Most people confuse self-worth with self-esteem. Self-esteem often fluctuates because it depends on achievements, relationships, and external approval. If you succeed, you feel good. If you fail, you feel diminished. But self-worth awareness does not bend under these conditions. It is the quiet acknowledgement that your existence itself has meaning, that your being is inherently valuable without the need for justification. This awareness liberates you from the exhausting cycle of proving, comparing, and seeking. When you awaken to this truth, you no longer measure yourself against the fleeting standards of society. You begin to see that no position, no possession, and no opinion has the power to define your essence. When awareness of self-worth arises, the way you relate to others changes. No longer do you seek constant approval, nor do you engage in battles to assert your superiority. You begin to meet others without the weight of competition, without the fear of being overlooked. This shift creates space for genuine connection, for listening without defense, for speaking without the need to dominate. Your relationships become less about validation and more about presence, because when you know your worth, you no longer carry the hidden agenda of being accepted at any cost. Instead, you interact from a place of wholeness. There is a natural authority that comes with self-worth awareness. It does not shout, it does not demand, it does not boast. It is quiet, steady, and unshakable. Others may sense it in your posture, in your gaze, in your ability to remain calm in the face of turbulence. It is an energy that does not depend on being acknowledged, yet it cannot be ignored. It transforms the way you walk into a room, not because you try to impress, but because you no longer fear being unseen. This awareness is not about superiority. It is about authenticity, about the courage to be without masks, without constant adjustment to fit the expectations of others. To cultivate this awareness, one must be willing to turn inward. Society teaches us to chase worth outside, in careers, in relationships, in recognition. But awareness arises in silence, in the willingness to sit with oneself without distraction. In that stillness, the voices of doubt and insecurity may surface, but they are not the truth of who you are. They are echoes of conditioning, accumulated over years of comparison and judgment. By observing these voices without identifying with them, you begin to see that underneath them lies a steady presence and unchanging awareness that has always been there. This presence does not measure, it does not compete, it simply is. Self-worth awareness also transforms how you respond to failure. Without this awareness, failure is seen as proof of inadequacy, a sign that you are not enough. But with awareness, failure becomes feedback, information that guides your growth without diminishing your essence. You are no longer crushed by setbacks because you know that your worth is not tied to outcomes. This allows you to take risks, to step outside of comfort zones, to explore paths without the paralyzing fear of being defined by the result. True creativity and innovation arise from this space of freedom because you are no longer imprisoned by the fear of being judged. Another dimension of self-worth awareness is the relationship with boundaries. Without awareness, people often say yes when they mean no. They give away energy to maintain approval. They sacrifice well-being to avoid rejection. But when you know your worth, you begin to honor your limits. You realize that saying no is not rejection, but protection. You recognize that your time and energy are sacred, and you guard them not with aggression, but with clarity. This clarity naturally commands respect because others feel the strength of someone who does not compromise their essence for acceptance. Awareness of self-worth also softens the relationship with success. Success is no longer pursued as a desperate attempt to prove value, but embraced as an expression of your natural growth. You celebrate achievements without clinging to them because they do not define you. And when success fades, as all external conditions do, your sense of self remains intact. This stability creates resilience because no circumstance has the power to shake the foundation of your being. It is important to recognize that this awareness is not a final destination. It is a practice, a continuous unfolding. There will be moments when doubt resurfaces, when external pressures tempt you to forget your worth. But awareness means noticing this without losing yourself in it. It is the act of remembering again and again that your value is not on trial. The practice deepens with time, and each moment of awareness strengthens the foundation until it becomes the natural state of being. Self-worth awareness allows life to be lived with less fear and more authenticity. It grants the freedom to express, to connect, to create without the burden of constant evaluation. It is not about becoming someone else, but about uncovering the inherent value that has always been present beneath layers of doubt and conditioning. When you rest in this awareness, the constant striving eases, the need to prove fades, and the energy once consumed by insecurity becomes available for growth, creativity, and presence. Attachment is often mistaken for love, care, or loyalty, but in reality it carries within it a subtle weight, a hidden chain that binds both the giver and the receiver. Attachment seeks to hold, to possess, to control, even when unspoken. It grows from fear of loss, from insecurity, from the illusion that clinging will preserve what is fragile. Respect, on the other hand, emerges from freedom, from strength, from an understanding that what is real does not need to be held with force. Respect is the silent recognition of the value in another being or in life itself, without the compulsion to shape it into one's own image. To see the difference between attachment and respect is to uncover one of the great lessons in human relationships and in our relationship with the world. Attachment whispers, "I cannot live without this." It places its roots in dependency, in the belief that fulfillment comes only when something or someone is held tightly. But this grip does not allow growth. It suffocates. Imagine a tree tied down with ropes, unable to sway with the wind. In time, the very support that was meant to keep it safe becomes the reason for its weakness. The same occurs with attachment. What begins as closeness becomes suffocation, and what begins as love becomes fear of losing. The mind does not see clearly when it is driven by attachment, because it is constantly seeking to hold on to what by nature is impermanent. Respect, in contrast, does not seek to possess. Respect acknowledges the natural flow of life, where people experiences and even emotions rise and fall like the tide. Respect says, "I honor this, I value this, but I do not own it." It grants space for freedom because freedom is the soil in which respect thrives. When we respect someone, we allow them to be who they are without projecting our fears or demands onto them. When we respect life, we engage with it without trying to force it to conform to our desires. Attachment often creates suffering because it is rooted in resistance to change. The world moves in cycles, in transformations, in endless motion. Nothing stays as it is forever. To be attached is to demand permanence in a realm that is inherently impermanent. This contradiction gives rise to tension, disappointment, and pain. Respect, however, moves with change. It understands that honoring someone or something does not require freezing it in time. Respect aligns itself with impermanence and in doing so remains light, fluid, and unburdened. The energy of attachment is heavy. It feels like carrying stones in your heart. There is anxiety in it because the mind fears losing what it clings to. There is jealousy in it because it compares and seeks to protect its possession. There is dependency in it because without the object of attachment, the self feels incomplete. Respect is the opposite. It carries no weight, for it is not bound to fear. There is clarity in respect because it does not distort reality to fit its desire. There is serenity in respect because it flows without the need to control. There is completeness in respect because it does not require possession to affirm its value. When relationships are built on attachment, they become fragile. The more tightly one holds, the more suffocating the bond becomes. Eventually, cracks appear, not because love is absent, but because fear and dependency replace trust. Respect nurtures relationships in a different way. Respect gives space for growth, for individuality, for evolution. In a bond built on respect, two individuals remain whole, yet connected. Their connection is not based on fear of losing, but on the joy of mutual recognition. This distinction also applies beyond human relationships. We become attached to our identities, our possessions, our achievements, our past. We say, "This is mine. This defines me. Without it, I am less." This attachment limits our growth because we cling to what is comfortable and known even when it no longer serves us. Respect for the self, however, means acknowledging where we have been without being imprisoned by it. It means honoring our journey while allowing transformation. Respect for life means engaging fully in each moment without demanding it stay the same. The discipline of seeing attachment for what it is requires honesty. It is easier to say, "I hold on because I love," than to admit, "I hold on because I fear." But when we look directly, we see that true love is inseparable from respect. Love suffused with attachment becomes fragile, but love expressed through respect becomes expansive. It gives instead of taking. It uplifts instead of restraining. It accepts change instead of resisting it. Respect is not passive. It is not indifference or detachment. It is active presence, active recognition, active honoring. To respect someone is to see their truth clearly and still stand with them, without chains, without demands. To respect oneself is to accept one's weaknesses and strengths without hiding from them. To respect life is to participate fully without trying to bend its flow to personal desire. When we reflect on attachment versus respect, we begin to see that one closes and the other opens. One tightens the hand, the other opens the palm. One creates fear, the other cultivates trust. One weakens by dependency, the other strengthens through freedom. And in every aspect of life, we are given the choice to bind or to honor, to cling or to respect, to hold in fear or to release in strength. There is an unseen weight carried by those who do not know how to draw a line, and an unseen strength carried by those who do. Boundaries are not walls that divide us from others, they are gates that regulate what may enter and what must remain outside. Without them, one is like a house without doors, a field without fences, a mind without discipline. Everything wanders in, everything leaves traces, and the essence of the self is scattered in all directions. To protect your energy is not selfish. To protect your time is not arrogance. To protect your mind is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the recognition that the human spirit is not infinite in its capacity to absorb, and that without boundaries, it becomes a sponge that soaks up the storms of others until it can no longer distinguish its own essence from what it has absorbed. In the training of discipline, whether of body or mind, there is always a clear distinction between what strengthens and what weakens. To move forward requires the ability to say yes and the wisdom to say no. A sword is sharp not because it touches everything, but because it is honed carefully, removing what is unnecessary. In the same way, the self becomes sharp and luminous when it is protected by boundaries that prevent erosion by distractions, by manipulations, by endless demands that pull one away from their inner path. Consider how nature teaches us this truth. A river remains a river because its banks hold it together. Without boundaries, the water spreads into a swamp, stagnant and undefined. A tree grows tall because its roots respect the boundary of the soil that holds it, anchoring it from the winds. Even the human body is made strong by boundaries, the skin that separates the inner organs from the outer world, the immune system that guards against invasion. Nature itself demonstrates that without protection, there is no clarity of form, no strength, no survival. The modern world glorifies availability, always reachable, always open, always connected. But the spirit is not designed for such exposure. Without silence, the mind collapses. Without rest, the body breaks. Without limits, relationships become suffocating, draining, and destructive. Boundaries are not only a shield, they are medicine. They restore balance by ensuring that what enters your field of awareness serves growth instead of corrosion. Boundaries are also a mirror. They reveal to others how you value yourself. If you do not speak your limits, if you allow intrusion again and again, the world learns to take and take until nothing remains. But when you stand firm, when you express without anger but with quiet certainty, you show that your energy is sacred. And then, even those who once crossed the line learn to respect what is guarded, because what is guarded begins to shine with worth. There is also the internal boundary, the line we draw with ourselves. Protection is not only from others, but also from the tendencies of our own minds. When we allow the mind to wander endlessly into worries, regrets, and imagined futures, we violate the boundary of the present moment. When we overindulge in distraction, we weaken the wall that holds our focus. When we speak harshly to ourselves, we fail to protect our inner ground from the corrosive effects of judgment. To live with strength requires that we establish boundaries inside as well as outside. There are those who fear boundaries because they confuse them with disconnection. But boundaries are not rejection, they are direction. They guide where energy flows and how it is used. Just as a bow must be strung with tension to launch an arrow, the spirit requires boundaries to direct its force. Without them, our strength leaks into endless places, never concentrated, never effective. With them, our lives become precise, purposeful, and filled with meaning. Imagine a life without boundaries. Every demand answered, every request accepted, every criticism absorbed. Such a life would not glow, it would dim. It would not breathe, it would suffocate. To live without protection is to live in constant compromise, where the inner flame is extinguished by the winds of others. Boundaries, then, are a form of love. Love for the self that deserves to thrive. Love for the path that deserves to be walked without constant interruption. Love even for others, because when you set clear limits, you prevent resentment, bitterness, and hidden conflict from poisoning relationships. Clarity in limits creates purity in connection. Those who know where you stand can meet you there with respect rather than uncertainty. The act of setting boundaries requires courage. It is not always comfortable to say no. It is not always easy to withdraw from what drains. It is not always welcomed when you protect your time, your focus, your energy. But the discomfort of boundary setting is small compared to the devastation of a life without them. Weak boundaries erode slowly, invisibly, until the spirit feels heavy, the body exhausted, the mind scattered. Strong boundaries may feel rigid at first, but with time, they become the framework that allows freedom to exist. In the ancient teachings, the warrior does not walk into battle unshielded. The monk does not open his monastery to all noise. The gardener does not allow weeds to overrun the soil. Each understands that to preserve what is sacred, one must guard it. So too with your inner world. Your mind is a monastery. Your body is a temple. Your time is your most sacred currency. Boundaries are the guardians at the gates, ensuring that only what nourishes, strengthens, and uplifts is permitted to remain within, and that what seeks to drain or destroy is gently but firmly turned away. There are moments in life when the most powerful action is not to fight harder, not to hold tighter, and not to plead for something to change, but to simply walk away. This act, though it may appear passive to the outside world, is an immense demonstration of inner power. To walk away with strength means to carry with you the clarity of your values, the steadiness of your mind, and the courage to release what is not aligned with your growth. It is not about escaping or running away in fear. It is about understanding that strength sometimes looks like silence, like distance, like choosing yourself over the weight of what is holding you back. Walking away with strength begins with awareness. Many people remain in situations that drain them, relationships, habits, environments, or commitments, simply because they fear the uncertainty that lies beyond them. They are trapped not because the walls are unbreakable, but because they cannot imagine themselves outside those walls. Strength is not only the force to break free, it is the vision to see beyond the prison. Once you can envision a life without the heaviness of that situation, you begin to feel the energy shift. Walking away becomes less about loss and more about reclaiming. Strength does not roar loudly when you walk away. It does not need to announce itself, for true strength is quiet and steady. When you walk away, the world may not cheer. Others may question your decision, misunderstand your silence, or try to pull you back into what you have left. But walking away with strength is not about proving anything to anyone else. It is about proving to yourself that your peace, your growth, and your truth matter more than the comfort of familiarity. It is about no longer betraying yourself by staying in a place that diminishes your spirit. Every step away from what no longer serves you is a step toward alignment. But these steps are rarely easy. They require you to confront the fears that whisper, "What if I cannot find better? What if I fail? What if I regret leaving?" These doubts are natural, but they are not truth. The truth is that by staying in a place of constant struggle, you have already lost something precious: time, energy, and your inner clarity. Walking away with strength allows you to reclaim these resources and direct them where they belong. The path of walking away teaches detachment. Detachment is not indifference. It is the deep understanding that clinging to what is unstable, unhealthy, or untrue does not bring safety. Imagine holding onto a rope that is burning your hands. The natural reaction is to grip tighter, hoping it will stop the pain, but the real freedom comes only when you let go. Strength is recognizing that letting go does not diminish you, but instead protects you. To walk away with strength is to honor your hands, your heart, and your mind, refusing to let them be consumed by what causes harm. There is wisdom in walking away without anger. When you leave with rage, you are still chained to what you left behind. Anger ties you to the story, keeps you repeating the conflict in your mind, and robs you of inner silence. To walk away with strength means to leave without the need for revenge, without carrying bitterness, without poisoning your spirit with resentment. Strength is choosing the higher ground, not because the other does not deserve your reaction, but because you deserve your peace. Walking away also requires trust in yourself and in life. Trust that new doors will open where old ones have closed. Trust that the emptiness you may feel after leaving is only a space waiting to be filled with something better. Trust that you are capable of building again, of finding again, of becoming again. This trust is not blind. It is built from the knowledge that you have already survived everything you once thought would break you. Strength remembers your resilience and walks forward with it. The act of walking away is also an act of self-respect. When you choose to walk away, you are choosing not to tolerate what diminishes your worth. You are saying, without words, that your time is sacred, your energy is valuable, and your spirit is not to be wasted. Strength is knowing that respect is not demanded from others first, it is given to yourself first. And once you respect yourself deeply, you cannot stay in spaces where that respect is violated. Strength is also patience. Walking away does not always lead to immediate relief or instant clarity. Sometimes you may walk away and feel lost in the silence that follows. But strength understands that silence is fertile ground. From this silence, new possibilities emerge. From this stillness, you learn who you are without the noise of what you left. Strength does not demand quick answers. It holds steady until the new path becomes visible. Walking away with strength is not a one-time decision. It is a practice that appears in many areas of life. It may be the courage to walk away from old habits that no longer nourish you, from negative self-talk that poisons your mind, or from environments that dim your light. Each time you walk away with strength, you affirm your alignment with truth and growth. You teach yourself that you are not bound by past choices, that you are not chained to what no longer feels right, and that you always have the power to step into something new. Strength in walking away is ultimately a return to yourself. It is choosing the path where you no longer need to beg for acceptance, force what is not flowing, or shrink yourself to fit into spaces too small for your spirit. It is walking into the unknown with dignity, carrying nothing but your clarity, your self-respect, and your trust in the journey ahead.